How do I sound in terms of my level?
Oh, you sound great.
Okay. Let's see
Is
if
that
I can
the
get this
is
up
that
a
the
little bit.
travel Yeti, the blue Yeti?
That's the Blue Yeti. So we'll
Nice.
see. We'll see how it does this time.
The Bloody Yeti is a special drink they serve at the Calgary Chili's.
The New Brunswick Archaeology Podcast, featuring your hosts, Gabe Hrynick and Ken Holyoke.
Welcome back to the New Brunswick Archaeology Podcast. I am Gabe Hrynick, critic in New Brunswick, and I am joined by Dr. Ken Holyoke, live from the Chili's at the Calgary Airport.
Yes.
How are you, Ken?
Doing well. I'm kind of, still a little bit, I think, in a little bit of a shock. It's
You can say you're hungover. That's what it is, right?
I'm not too bad that way. I am quite tired. We were my cousin and my brother-in-law and I were out fairly late, but it was a relatively low key evening.
Ken has the look in his eyes of a man who spent an evening drinking Balvenie scotch that's old enough to be Indiana Jones's girlfriend. Yeah.
So actually, I didn't actually have any scotch last night. I had
oh my goodness.
I had some nice English ales and a couple margaritas. So
all right, well there you go. So listener, we'll return to that theme here momentarily, but Ken, we've been away for a little while from this podcast. The listener might have noticed that we broke with our fortnightly schedule because we were in the field, and in addition to being in the field, you were writing that little term paper you had to fly back to Toronto to discuss last night. And so this is our first episode back, and the theme of this episode is basically going to be your dissertation. But before we get to that, we have some administrative stuff to go through. And so the first one is that we are sponsored, as always, by the Association of Professional Archaeologists of New Brunswick, who I believe still do not have a website, but may be accessed via the Internet Wayback Machine. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, you can pull some of the pages from the Wayback Machine. That's
excellent.
Yeah,
and our other thing that the listener might have noticed here is that we, despite this 1 month absence, dear listener, we still do not have a prize, a new name for this podcast. We're still called the New Brunswick Archaeology Podcast. And so, Ken, if a listener had a new name for this podcast that they thought was more suitable, what email address would they send that to?
They would send it to newbrunswickarchaeology@gmail.com. That's all one word, New Brunswick Archaeology, spelled ARCHAEOLOGY @gmail.com.
And listener, if that were to be this fortnight, the one that we selected, the new name that we selected for this podcast, you would be in line for an extremely interesting and
extremely
absolutely important prize. And so the listener is going to have to remember that one of the themes Ken and I have been working on in this podcast is that it's important to take care of yourself. It's important to as my former graduate student used to say, look out for number one. And so that self-care theme is one that we're going to pick up in this episode. So Ken, could you show the listener, tell the listener, paint a picture with your words of what I'm holding here?
Our friend and co-host Gabe has from the edge of his screen pulled into the picture a pocket-sized gong. It looks like
That's right.
Complete,
this is
complete with mallet.
Small mallet. And so
we're not hearing the gong noise. This is the same issue we had with the xylophone, I think.
Okay. Well, the listener will just have to know that I'm holding a gong, a small gong, and that's going to be important. We're going to return to that as I go through this prize read, because Ken, you really don't want it to be Chekhov's gong. If a gong appears at the beginning of a prize read, it needs to go off at some point during the prize read.
We can simulate a gong noise for that if need be. That
we could. Maybe we'll add it in later. And so Ken, I wanted to take this opportunity because I thought, you may remember me when I was a graduate student, and you're no longer a graduate student. I'm no longer a graduate student. But over the last decade or so, you've probably noticed that my personal philosophy has become a little bit more Eastern. You know, you're out looking for a babysitter. I'm out looking for a babysitter. And the reason I bring this up is because you might recall that as a PhD student, I was sometimes wound a little bit tight, you know, sometimes a little bit of anxiety, occasional battle with depression, moments of self-doubt. And all of that worrying, amidst all that worrying, you may also recall that I was doing battle with pre-hypertension. Do you remember this?
That is correct.
Yeah, and it's a funny thing.
You lost enough hairline for both of us, I think, actually, during that time period. That was
I sure did. Yeah, and so no, it's a funny thing about these Western approaches. You know, Western biomedicine is that Western biomedicine is really primarily interested in treating real diseases. You know, and pre-hypertension is not what would really be understood as a real disease, and so. When I finished my PhD and I took a faculty post, I noticed that I'd really shaved some digits off the old systolic aspect of my blood pressure. That's the numerator, so to speak, of the blood pressure. And I think that was in part related to some serious lifestyle changes that I'd made. And the first was getting paid a salary that was more substantial than my graduate stipend, but I really knew it was going to take more than that to get the blood pressure where I wanted it. And also to take a philosophical approach that I thought was more consistent with the kind of life that I wanted to be living.
Are you Zen, I'm guessing?
What's that?
More Zen.
Well, yeah, that's where my guru came in. So I went out and I met this guru, and I selected this one really because of his singular ability to meld Eastern and Western approaches in a way that's both firm and compassionate. And the winner this week should know that this is a really special offer for our listeners because it's ordinarily only available to people with American health insurance. But this guy's making really a special exception. And this guy's in real demand, right? And that's part of why I don't want to share his name right now. But look, he studied with Thomas Merton and he used to shoot pool with Ram Dass. And he's got all sorts of hotshot clientele. Like he works, for instance, with the Oakland A's bullpen pitchers. Their ERA was even higher than my systolic blood pressure. I can tell you that much. So anyway, you probably want to know what the prize this week is at this juncture.
I am just waiting with bated breath here. That's
Yeah, good. And so look, listener, I'm a doctor, but I'm not the kind who helps people. But it looks to me, again, you know, from a sort of Eastern perspective here, that Ken has got a bit of heat on his liver today. And that's simple enough to understand. That's just due to a yin deficiency, which leads to the accumulation of heat. And of course, that's the main cause for a liver yin deficiency is the kidney, which is the root source of the yin and the yang. And so to address this, I'm going to share just some of the kinds of tips that you can get from this guru who you may get to win. If you send in the new prize read, you may get to win 6 sessions with this. But he told me I can release this one trick for the listeners, but also to help Dr. Holyoke here.
So just to pause here for a second. Is this like a clickbait thing? Like,
oh no, this is real.
It's the one trick. This is the one trick that's gonna.
He's got lots of tricks. This is just the only one I can share with you on air.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And so what we're gonna do, Ken, is we're gonna do a breathing exercise. Okay.
Okay.
And so this is what we call the 4-7-8 breathing exercise. The units in the United States are slightly different. Don't worry about that now. Ken's in Canada. I'm in Canada. And that's going to be fine. And so, okay, Ken, I'm going to explain to you what you're going to do, and then we're going to do it on air, okay?
Okay.
So what you're going to first need to do is just behind your upper front teeth, you're going to want to sort of tuck your tongue. You know, that kind of fleshy ridge right there?
Okay, yeah.
Okay. And then now take a few practice breaths, exhaling through your mouth and just around your tongue. You might need to purse your lips slightly if this seems awkward. So kind of going to go...
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And now what I'm going to have you do is exhale completely through your mouth, making a whooshing sound.
Did you catch that?
That did not get picked up by the microphone, but the listener's going to have to know Ken just made a whooshing sound. Okay. Now you're going to close your mouth and you're going to inhale quietly through your nose to a mental count of 4. So breathe in for 4. Okay. And now you're going to want to hold your breath for a count of 7. And now you're going to exhale, making a whooshing sound again, and count to 8. Okay. And now what you're going to need to do, You've done the exercise here, but I'm going to need to hit this gong. And as soon as I hit the gong, I'm going to want you to just have a moment of silence where we can only hear the airport Gillies while you collect and think about something that you're grateful for. Are you ready for this?
And listener, if you can hear it, "Hey Mickey, You're So Fine" is is playing right now. So if it seems like there's some hint of that in the background, you're catching the background noise.
Okay. So you've got your gratitude all lined up? Okay. And so how do you feel, Ken?
I just want to make sure I switch back to the right. I was trying to pick up some ambiance.
I think we got some ambiance. Yeah.
Yeah. So, good. I mean, it is a little bit surreal.
Oh no. I meant, how do you feel after the breathing exercise?
Rejuvenated. Just
get your PhD shortly.
Yeah. Just totally different. Yeah.
Okay. So listen,
I had a similar breathing exercise thing at the tent where you could find your spirit animal at Common Ground, but it was 4, 4, and 4 then.
Yeah, that was the wrong one.
Okay.
So listener, look, the evidence is before me. I can see that Ken's liver is cool, and some of that is because he's currently hucking down another Caesar. But if this is the kind of work that you think might be helpful for you, consider shipping in a new name for this podcast, and we will get you set up with our official guru of the New Brunswick Archaeology podcast, who will help you with your various deficiencies and do so in a way that is firm and compassionate. So Ken, if we have the new name for this podcast, if some listener out there has it, where should they email it to?
New Brunswick Archaeology, all one word, newbrunswickarchaeology@gmail.com.
All right. And so Ken, is there anything in that mailbox?
Yes,
that's new?
There is, and apologies to the listener if we actually already read this, but this is from our loyal listener Wally, who provided us with the lovely bingo cards that you can find on our Instagram page or by contacting us via email at newbrunswickarchaeology@gmail.com. And Wally says, "Hi, Gabe and Ken. Love the field school episode. In an amusing coincidence, I noticed mid-episode that I happened to be wearing my T-shirt from the 2019 field school, where I learned how to be an archaeologist from Gabe and Arthur. That's Arthur Anderson, our colleague at the University of New England. I vividly recall getting stuck in my first ever 90-centimeter deep unit at that field school, and it would not have been the last. I'd be jealous of this year's students, even if they hadn't subsequently experienced the horrors of virgin clay." Thanks for the art shout out, by the way. I didn't know there were so many ways to shoehorn a certain sea monster into a design until the NEAS came along, but I do like the challenge. So this is referencing the patches for the New England or the Northeast Archaeological Survey that Wally made up. I'm also sorry to hear nobody has entered the Ecofor swag contest so far. Well, Wally, that has changed, and we've got some excitement coming up here soon. The thread that stuck out to me the most throughout the episode was this theme of accessibility. I'm so glad that Future NB is continuing to fund UNB's field schools, and that is an excellent, actually, program. I would have paid for my second field school if COVID hadn't canceled the 2020 season, and I'm still grateful for the organization despite the missed opportunity. Working in CRM, I definitely noticed the advantages that field schools offer, especially in terms of experiential learning and how field ready the average archaeology student actually is when they get to their first shovel bum job. Anything that can lower some of these financial barriers is vital to the health of the discipline. Cheers, Wally. P.S.
Thanks very much, Wally. That's lovely.
P.S. In reference to your episode, Indiana Jones and the "Oh no, I forgot the Stadia rod," sounds like a fantastic archaeology movie. Does it include a scene where the long-suffering TA has to reteach Dr. Jones Pythagorean theorem partway through laying in the grid?
I think it probably would.
I think probably would. Yeah.
Might well.
And as our colleague Trevor Dow and I learned one time, you can know Pythagorean theorem, but if you're using compasses that are set on different declinations, you will never find that 90-degree angle.
Sure won't. You sure won't. The real highlight of my recent field season, Ken, was the those MLID GPS units that are on the sticks.
Yep.
Yeah, I managed to drop one off a cliff and into the ocean, but turns out they float.
That's good.
Yeah, it was a nice surprise. It was even more exciting than the teachings of Pythagoras is dropping one of those units and having to scramble down to find it.
No, and being pleased that $2,000 didn't just float away into the intertidal zone.
Hard to explain to Shirk, I think.
Yeah.
So listener, the format roughly for this is going to be that last night before last, Ken Holyoke, Dr. Ken Holyoke, and I recorded the pregame for his thesis defense, where we also talked about what his thesis was about.
Yeah.
What we're doing now after the defense is we're going to do the post game, and also ask him how it went, and then we're going to have some of our hit pieces. And then we're going, or probably sometime around then, we're going to splice in Trevor Dow drawing for the first batch of Ecofor swag. Does that sound right to you, Ken?
That sounds right to me. And so what the listener will experience here is a switch over to the previously recorded episode, and then we'll pick back up with today's episode. This doesn't mean anything to you, listener, because we've sorted everything out chronologically, but exposition is how we guide everybody along. So
exactly. So I'll hit the gong, Ken, and we'll know that it's time to switch time.
Okay, perfect.
All right. So listener, we are at Ken's auxiliary studio here, and by we I mean really Ken is at Ken's auxiliary studio here. So where are you, Ken? Will you tell the listener?
Well, I am once again in the Calgary Airport Chili's, and as I have figured out, there are actually several of these ones. So I'm in the C gate. The C wing. I don't know what they call them here. C terminal or something like that.
It's C suite, isn't it? Isn't that what we call executives now? That they're C suite executives.
So this is I think the largest of the Chili's, so it might be the executive Chili's. Yes.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so Ken is in the C suite Chili's at the Calgary. And Ken, where are you going?
I am headed to the Big Smoke, to YYZ, or otherwise known as Toronto.
That's YYZ for our American listeners, and Toronto for our American listeners.
Exactly.
And what are you doing in Toronto?
And as the listener, the frequent listener might know, a theme of the first season of the show was my lamentations about not actually having finished my dissertation, despite getting what's called an ABD appointment, so an all but dissertation appointment,
a job, if you will,
a job.
Yes.
And it's quite a stretch to say that you've done everything but the dissertation, because but yeah, I am going to defend my thesis tomorrow in Toronto.
That is very exciting. And so Ken, for the listener here, I thought it might be interesting actually. What is it you learn in a PhD? I thought this is I was thinking about this, but I was going to ask you, and we're actually doing this before the dissertation, so before your defense. But one of the things I thought would be interesting to ask you is what you learned that was different than what you learned doing your master's. So the master's is kind of the I don't know, would it be fair to call it the kind of credential degree, right? You can do most kinds of archaeological employment outside of being a regular professor.
Yep.
With a master's, but many people in CRM have PhDs. So what's different between the master's and the PhD?
So like you said, the master's is a little bit like a credential degree. It's almost like a professional degree in archaeology now. And in fact, like, the university where I work, we actually have a CRM master's program, which is, in some ways basically setting up the MA as a professional degree, basically, right?
Mm-hmm. And you run that program, right?
Yes. Yeah. So I'm the coordinator for that program.
What's the program called? You might as well just give it a shout out, since
the CRM Masters program at the University of Lethbridge. So
great.
And accepting applications. Yeah, go Pronghorns. There you go. So your master's is about basically demonstrating that you can take a research product to its conclusion, right? So you can formulate a thesis statement, you can do your project, and you can finish the work, basically, right? The PhD, I think, is different in the sense that it's a larger scale. It's usually a little bit more independent than your master's was. So in this case, instead of working on a project that had already been excavated, or like I did for my master's, I developed a project. I developed fieldwork program. I developed some research methods, and instead of kind of going down one line of questioning, usually you have a couple lines of questioning. Your data set is probably a little bit larger in scale and in scope. And what maybe is a local sort of interpretation in your master's, in your PhD, I think you strive to do a little bit more of a global interpretation and a global context in terms of how your research contributes more broadly to, in our case, anthropological archaeology. And instead of thinking regionally, maybe you think a little bit more globally about your research.
Great. And so Toronto is in many ways like the most American of the Canadian PhD programs, I think. So I'm guessing that our experiences were about the same, but was your program, I'm trying to remember, I know you told me this, but your program is it about 2 years of coursework and then research for the PhD?
Yeah. So the idea is that you'll have 3 full semesters of coursework. So you take 6 courses basically. Mm-hmm. So I did 5 courses, and then I did one what's called a directed reading course. Mm-hmm. And that's where you develop with your supervisor a reading course where say you have a research focus that doesn't fit into one of the courses that are generally taught at a graduate level, or that, for example, isn't being offered in the time that you need to take it. So mm-hmm. In my case, I was really interested in landscape and phenomenology and placemaking.
Notice, listener, he said was interested. Writing this dissertation has broken him of that interest, I suspect.
Not entirely, but I think I was maybe a little bit naive about how I might be able to apply all these concepts. But
yeah, then actually, this is something else the listener won't know, is that in a graduate phenomenology course, the first 3 weeks are just devoted to every time you hear phenomena, not going do 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 do.
Phenomena. So my directed reading course was on landscape archaeology and phenomenology and placemaking, which is sort of the core theoretical avenue which I went down, and maybe we'll talk about this more post defense. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so you do a year and a half of coursework. You develop a thesis proposal. So basically, out of all of the coursework that I've done, the project that I had envisioned coming in, and the directed reading course should be shaping you towards a sort of a coherent a proposal. So this is a fairly comprehensive document. It's meant to be about, like 30 to 40 page paper in some ways, where you outline what the background to the area that you're working in, so the culture historical or regional background, why you think the research is important, what your argument is going to be. So these might be framed through 1 or 2 research questions. You're going to outline your methods. So how are you going to collect data to support those research questions? And you're going to present what you think your interpretations are going to be. So you're going to put a hypothesis forward about how you think this project is going to go forward. And then at U of T as well, you're required to include a timeline of how you think this stuff is going to plan out. So essentially kind of mapping out what your next couple of years are going to look like. And then you submit that to a committee, and a group of usually 5 or 6 professors read your work. They provide you guidance and comments on it. So your supervisor gives you kind of edits as you're building towards this completed document, and then it circulates. So supervisor kind of guides you through this. And then you do an oral defense of that thesis proposal. And so you stand up in front of a room and you do a short presentation about what your findings were, and maybe answer some of the questions that you had gotten from other people already. And then they ask you a series of questions about that work. And so the thesis proposal at U of T is structured around preparing students to have familiarity with an oral defense, which you will eventually have to do to defend your thesis when you have finished writing it. And once you have successfully defended that proposal, you have completed the coursework. At U of T, there's actually a language requirement as well. So I had to demonstrate that I can work in French, basically. Mm-hmm. And in some cases, actually, now they accept coding as a language. So a number of the paleoanthropologists use coding languages like R in their data sets. And so if you know how to code in a particular language, that's considered a language requirement now.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. And then, there's no comprehensive exam at Toronto anymore. Is that right?
That's correct. And I don't think there has been for some time.
Interesting.
So once you finish your thesis proposal, you are considered ABD. So you finish your coursework, you finish your language requirement, you've presented your research, and it's been defended. The proposal has been defended, and you set off to do your work. And you should maybe go over what comps are, because these are sort of the most sadistic thing that I think exists in the university world.
So I should say that I actually had a very good experience with my comprehensive exams, which were at the University of Connecticut, where I learned an awful lot. I've since been on a number of comprehensive exam committees, and I've gotten the sense that rewarding experience is not always the case. But so one of the things that Ken alluded to, though, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ken, but at Toronto, at least at the University of Connecticut, where I did my PhD, one of the things that you get to do is you get to add a little bit more, not just regional breadth, which you mentioned, but also you do some more work on typically like cultural anthropology and things like that.
Yeah.
So you get to take some graduate level coursework, or even outside of your immediate field, right? You might take history or something like that.
And you get exposed to a lot more voices, I think, is the other thing too, right? Like,
absolutely.
And perspectives. Like, that coursework is really about kind of shaping you into a more global researcher, like that you are more familiar with a broader set of reading, that you're not kind of winnowed down into a sort of more narrow place where you've been before. And it's meant to kind of open your eyes to new ways of thinking. Like, I will admit, I really didn't know a whole lot about, I was interested in the idea of landscape archaeology, but I didn't really know what the sort of background of it was, and phenomenology and sort of British archaeology, how it kind of developed this concept. And I won't bore the listener with that now. That's when I talk about my defense afterwards, what phenomenological theory is. But essentially, like, a lot of what I read during my graduate coursework opened my eyes to a body of literature that, the way I had been thinking about archaeology, that I kind of thought was a little bit out there. I was like, oh, well, there's actually people who do research like this. It's just I hadn't read that stuff before.
Yeah. And the purpose, I think, of the comprehensive exam at least at the University of Connecticut was to add sort of breadth rather than depth, right? So if the dissertation was a deep dive on a topic, the comprehensive exams where you got assigned a list of, I think at UConn, I'm trying to remember, I'm using part of my brain that I haven't had to use for a while. I think it was 5 exams. And so I think you got 5 reading lists, and each reading list had like 25 papers and 5 books on it. And you study for them for like a semester. And they would be on, things that were relevant to you, but also were sort of, you would get these, and then you'd get 5 questions. You'd have I think 3 hours per question. I took mine all in 1 week. And you would answer,
because Gabe is a masochist.
But the thing is, it actually is like the last time in my life where it felt like reading was my only job, right? I sat down with these 5 lists, read it, and then if you'd done the reading, you could at least have a stab at the questions, and retain some sense of dignity.
Exactly.
And so it's useful. It's the same idea. I think it's kind of a holdover of the various language requirements that PhD programs have, that you have to be able to read, at least nominally, in a scholarly language. The listener will know that I actually can't really read competently in another scholarly language, but still somehow met the requirements. So don't let that intimidate you.
What was your language?
German, but I'd taken enough as a undergraduate to nominally be able to read archaeology auf Deutsch.
For my exam, I had to take a French article, and Michael Chazen sent me an article on sort of lithic technology written in French, and I had to translate. It wasn't the whole article, but there was a substantial section. He basically said from this to this, and you had like 2 hours to do the translation, and it had to be like a real translation. It couldn't be sort of like literal word for word. It had to be that, you translate it into an article written in English. So, there's some of that nuance that is written, there's not a direct translation for this word, for example. So you actually have to restructure the sentence written in the other. What was yours?
My recollection was that for the North Americanists, if you'd taken enough of a foreign language as an undergraduate, you didn't have to take that exam.
Okay, interesting.
was my recollection. And I think I also had some version of like some graduate minor. I don't remember the exact way all the different things assembled, but I didn't actually have to do that, but I know some people did.
Hashtag failing UConn. So,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they're just giving out degrees there. That's
they really are. It's true. They we're that other university in Connecticut. There's that small one in New Haven. So Ken, you I think when you started your PhD, you were planning like. So I know you've always been interested in an academic career, or at least you had become interested in an academic career. But there was a substantial possibility you were going to go back and do cultural resource management at the end of it. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, I left the door open to the PhD being kind of my last opportunity. Like what I like what you said, that this is sort of the reading course is sort of your last opportunity to just kind of read and enjoy and learn. And I think that anybody who's taking on a PhD project, I think one of the things that can be hard to appreciate while you're doing it is that you will never get another opportunity to read and kind of in this unfettered, beautiful world of being a graduate student again, and sort of relish it more than being stressed about it. I think kind of take it and run with it. But yeah, so I went in, with my eyes open to a challenging job market in the academic world. I think anybody has this starting out, a little bit of imposter syndrome, not really sure if I had the chops to do academia. But also, I enjoy CRM. I did not enjoy being on the road as much as I was with a young kid. And so I viewed the PhD as a way to potentially just go back into either private consulting into the private consulting world, or the public sector, and contribute to CRM in that way as sort of a, in a more administrative or senior position, where, I wouldn't be on the road all the time, but I'd still be engaging with archaeology and do the occasional field work stuff, like kind of have a little bit more opportunity to pick and choose what I wanted to do.
Yeah, so it's just kind of a thought experiment. And the reason I was thinking about this was I was talking to a friend and colleague of mine who is a PhD, runs, or I guess has a PhD. That's sort of weird that we say that is a PhD. That's kind of odd, but I guess has a PhD. And did a bunch of interesting work on isotopes and human evolution and all sorts of stuff. But then ultimately now runs a series of several consulting companies down here in New England, TerraSearch and Heritage, and I think they just bought it. Dave Leslie.
Okay, yeah.
And but one of the things that I think is interesting about I guess since we're talking about Dave, is that my sense is, and it'd be interesting to ask him about this, is that one of the things that the PhD equipped him to do, I mean, he's a sharp guy, obviously, but his research was not in the Northeast, really, originally. Is it seems like the PhD gave him these tools that he was pretty quickly able to pick up and apply to a new problem set. And I'd be curious to get your sort of thoughts on that, or just more broadly too, if you think if you knew someone, say, who was interested in CRM, but also, came and said, Professor Holyoke, I'm interested in doing a PhD, what you might tell them, or what considerations you might tell them to think about.
So that they want to do a PhD but get back into CRM, is that kind of what?
Yeah, or that they wouldn't rule it out, right? That they're not dead set on it. Well, I guess I know my advice to someone dead set on an academic career is start learning to be not dead set on an academic career, right? That's kind of, I guess, the first advice, is accept that there's a variety of ways to have a fulfilling life in archaeology, and being dead set on the one that's very, very difficult to get a job in is probably not the ticket for happiness. But I guess what sort of skills should they pick up? What is the applicability of the PhD to cultural resource management work? I'm just kind of curious about your thoughts.
I think like you pointed out, I think one of the things that you are doing is you're thinking about a lot more broadly about problems. You're able, this about me. I struggle with being able to see the forest for the trees sometimes, and I spend a lot of time writing shrubbery when I should be kind of thinking about land use planning, I guess would be the scale. But the PhD kind of opens your eyes to different ways of approaching archaeological questions. Like you read so broadly that you are able to be more familiar with how archaeology is done in other parts of the world, how people apply different methods. You learn skills like how to read deeply and read quickly, how to be able to draw out something from literature. And so, if you're reading through technical reports or you're trying to get yourself familiar with the local culture history in an area, one of the things that you will acquire is just sort of this skill to be able to digest a ton of information and be able to condense it into packages. So, be able to pull out the important information from a whole bunch of stuff and be able to communicate that. You're going to be a better writer, which I think is critical in CRM. You will write differently in CRM than you will in an academic setting. But if you really apply yourself at learning how to write, one of the things you'll find is that more you write, the better you are at it, and it actually becomes much easier to write in different voices. So one of the things I try to encourage my students to think about when they're, kind of complaining about having to write so much is that the idea with writing is that if you do all sorts of different types of writing, so critical responses and short essays and long essays and annotations like annotated bibliographies and that sort of stuff, you're learning how to write in a whole bunch of different ways, and that's going to make you better when you get back into whatever field it is that you choose to pursue, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think one of the topics that you and I have tried to emphasize, I think, on this podcast is that obviously the degree of publication is going to be different in cultural resource management than in academia. It's going to be different at, say, a research institution compared to a more teaching-focused institution. All of that is true, but that I think it is important for folks in CRM, for folks in government. There is still the code of archaeological ethics isn't unique because someone is not in academia, and it still obligates people, I think, to share the results of their work. And so, one of the things actually that I think is great about Dave's company, who we were just talking about, and I think some of his and I suspect some of this is from his background in doing a PhD, is his companies have a real kind of culture of publication, right? That they're pumping a lot of stuff out.
Yep.
And I think that's the kind of thing we're trying to encourage. And also, I think collaborations and to some degree, your program, I hope, builds this up as well, where you've got in an academic setting a program focused on CRM and hopefully building collaborations for lots of publication, because it's really important.
And being able to know like what is publishable out of research, that not everything you're going to do is going to turn into a publication, but that there is something that you are doing and whatever you're producing, there is some piece of that is without question publishable, or
Absolutely.
The master's, you wouldn't pass that master's program, right? Like there's something to your research that is contributing to the discipline more broadly. And I mean, and like, I think it goes without saying too, and we didn't mention this, is that during your PhD, chances are you're collecting data either through fieldwork or collections research. And without question, you're going to develop new skills and methods for analyzing archaeological data that are going to be critical and that are going to offer you opportunities to know how to apply that in the professional, like in the consulting, for example, if that's where you end up.
Absolutely. And so on this subject, Ken, I believe that Stephen Loring, who is your external examiner?
Yeah, external appraiser.
External appraiser. My goodness. And Stephen Loring is an Arctic archaeologist, Smithsonian, great guy, tons of interesting work, especially on Ramachurt.
Yep.
But am I right that Stephen had you add a community or a public archaeology statement to your dissertation?
Yeah. So he actually had a really interesting comment about how, it's clear that I'm doing some kind of level of community engaged archaeology, but one of the things that he said is, becoming more common is that the readers of our work, if we're really doing community engaged archaeology, should include the communities who we're working with. And so, you write a thesis in a very academic tone, and one of the ways that you can help communicate the results of a couple 100-page thesis is by writing sort of an executive summary. And so I do this when I write technical reports for the community. So there's a page or two that they can peel off the front of that and send out to community members about what's the purpose of the work that I'm doing. What are the implications of it? What are the findings? Why is it important? Why should you be interested in it? Or, or why not, kind of thing. And so, so I have included a 3-page summary for interested readers at the front that is aimed at communicating why I did the work that I did, what I found, how I did it, and maybe what the implications are, or the contribution of my work more broadly. And it's aimed at an audience of the general public, Indigenous communities, or anybody who might want to learn a little bit more about archaeology. And so one of the things that I think I'll probably do once it's the final version, or the okayed version, is I will share that on my academia page, for example, so that people can see how my work communicates more broadly, and generate conversations, I think, that would go beyond just the thesis itself.
Excellent. So trying to think about those multiple audiences for any given piece of archaeological research.
Yeah. And like you pulled out a really great line from the SAA and their ethical principles, describes many publics. And I think that that's actually a really excellent way to think about the way that archaeology, who we work with and for, basically, are these many publics.
Yes. So thinking about who might find some use in your research. Okay, cool. So, and then we mentioned, so your external appraiser is Stephen Loring, out of Smithsonian. Who else is on your committee?
So my supervisor, Gary Copeland.
Okay, West Coast guy.
Northwest Coast guy, literally wrote the book on some of the Northwest Coast archaeology.
Yep, that's
household archaeology.
And Matson, right? Copeland and Matson, Matson and Copeland.
Yep. Household archaeology guy too. So my core committee is made up of Michael Shazen, who's a lithic technologist and lithics expert. Works mostly on Paleolithic stuff in Israel and South Africa,
but is branching out into North America. We've brought Michael Chazen over to the dark side and is interested in the Trenton gravels now.
Exactly. Yeah. So his graduate student Amy Fox, and I like to think I had a little bit of a role in it, but we've convinced him that Northeast archaeology is that Northeast lithic technology itself is also very interesting, which Michael, I think, wasn't convinced of for some time.
He seemed like he it was fun. When I was in Toronto for some reason, I sat and chatted with him for a while. I think with you, he had the real zeal of the converted. He was this he's super excited, and that'll be great. He's an interesting guy, and he's done a lot of interesting work. So that'll be a great so nice work converting people. You brought Gary Copeland over to the East Coast, Michael Chazen to North America, you and Amy, and who else is on your committee?
And then a regional guy, so Craig Sapola, who is the former curator for North American archaeology at the ROM, the Royal Ontario Museum, and he is now an associate professor at Tufts University, which is in Massachusetts.
Yeah, it's just outside of Boston.
Yeah, and Craig has had a long-term research project working with the Mohegan in Connecticut.
He worked at the other res when I was working at Foxwoods.
So he has a community engaged project and he does mostly sort of early contact and historic archaeology, but is kind of a theoretical whiz. So he's big into the materiality and ontological turn literature. He's written a couple books about archaeological theory. So he's kind of a regional scope and theoretical wizard in that way, and then the rest of the defense committee. So that's my core committee, is Gary and Michael and Craig. Cool. And for the defense, they add a couple extra people that read extra readers, and so Max Friesen, who's Arctic archaeology mentor of a good friend of ours, Matthew Betts.
And so Max is a zoo archaeologist.
Yep. Was an acolyte of the Howard Savage Lab. And then Ted Banning.
Oh, cool. Okay, another household guy.
No more, just the Bell. Yeah.
The listener will know that Ken just decided, because he's defending tomorrow, not to have his fourth breakfast Caesar at the Chili's there in Calgary.
This is the get to the airport, have a coffee, then have a Caesar, so that get your uppers and downers balanced out, so that you can be kind of like uncomfortable but sleepy on the plane.
and need to pee. That's also crucial. That's nothing like quite like really getting that.
I've got about half an hour to pee about 6 times before I get on the plane, so I don't need to get out of my seat again.
Yeah. For the American listener, what is a Caesar? What is this repulsive thing you're consuming?
So Gabe hates these things, but they are one of my favorites. And so it's clamato, which is clam and tomato juice mixed together. And I'm not sure who originally came up with this idea, but clamato juice. I think it's called clamato juice. Would it be juice?
I believe I've seen them that you can get them pre-mixed. Yeah.
And there's Tabasco sauce in it, Worcester sauce. You've got vodka, spicy salt rimmer around the edge, and usually you have a piece of celery or a spicy bean. This one actually had a spicy piece of asparagus in it.
Interesting. That's the Chili's special, I guess.
I think so. Yeah.
So it's sort of a Bloody Mary, which I also don't care for Canadian tastes.
It's because a Bloody Mary is just tomato juice, isn't it?
I'm actually not sure.
Okay. In any case,
yeah,
they're delicious, and they're a great breakfast drink for anybody who's looking for that certain thing to line your stomach before the noon hour.
Yes.
So getting back
when
to
yogurt just doesn't fit the bill. So T. Max Friesen was one of your examiners, and then Ted Banning, Near Eastern houses, but also wrote that great the lab methods book. Was an archaeologist lab or something?
Archaeologist laboratory, household guy. So he and Gary actually co-edited a book like People in Big Houses. Ted's research has been mostly based in the Neolithic and the Levant. So the woodland of the Fertile Crescent, basically.
Yeah.
So that's the examining committee.
Cool. Everyone going to be there in person or no?
So I'm fairly sure. So everybody is going to be there in person except Loring, I think. Craig actually may be there.
Cool.
Gary had said something the other day that made me think he may be there in person. I could be wrong. Yeah. Cool. But and then we're going to be chaired by a Professor Boucher from the Faculty of Information. I guess the chair of these sessions of the dissertation defenses. Anthropology does the Faculty of Informations, and Faculty of Information does Anthropologies. Apparently, that's a long-standing thing that they've had. So,
okay, and Faculty of Information, is that the library school, basically?
Yeah, library school, and they're affiliated with OISE, which is the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So, when does your plan? We probably have to let you go fairly soon here, don't we?
Yeah. I'll probably have to jet here in a couple minutes.
Okay. So let's just get your sort of your last thoughts going in on this. So how are you feeling about it?
I'm ready for 4 p.m. tomorrow. That's
yes.
I'm in the frame of mind where I'm happy with my presentation. I'm fairly prepared to answer the questions. I feel good with the committee comments and the external appraiser comments. Make me think that for the most part, I think everybody's in agreement that the thesis is defensible, obviously. But I'm feeling pretty good about it. Good. A little bit of stress, but I think that's a good thing.
For sure. I mean, I think that's normal, but no, I think you're right. They would probably not let it get to this stage if they were concerned about it. And that committee is really the A team too, which is exciting.
Yeah. So
it's the old joke, right? That it's the last time you're guaranteed to be in a room where everyone's read what you've written.
That's very true, and hopefully they've read it. That's that they didn't just send the comments.
Exactly.
So I'm looking forward to it. It's a long time coming. How
long were you in? You finished in quick time, didn't you?
Almost 6 years to the day.
Was it 6? Okay.
Yeah. So, but working full time for 3 of those.
Yeah.
Like my kids, my daughter was 8 months old when I started my PhD.
Crazy.
And now I have a 4-year-old son. So, that's it's grown up with me and my children.
Yeah. Yeah, no, as you know, I did this slightly differently. I did this as a bachelor and much younger, which probably meant that my lifestyle as a PhD student was somewhat different than yours. But they,
yeah, and I think my wife is thrilled for me to get done. She's very, very proud of me, but also has now been with me through 2 degrees, and I think is probably fairly excited that I'm done school. So.
Well, talk to this library science guy on your committee. Maybe you could pick up an MLIS while you're there, and develop some other skills, or check out the MBA program while you're in town. You got options.
Yeah, could do GIS certificate at some point or something like that. So.
Absolutely, yeah. Never stop learning, Ken. Never stop learning.
Exactly.
Okay, so but just before I let you go, you did a what's called a paper dissertation. What's the approximate titles of the 3 papers in it?
So the first one is a paper you and I co-wrote. So there's an introduction.
Cool.
The first paper is a paper you and I co-wrote, which is called What Can the Far Northeast Say About the Maritime Woodland?
Great, which is already published. So that's
which
exciting.
Is already published.
So any criticisms about that are going to land on deaf ears.
Yeah. The second paper was a paper I published with Susan Blair and Cliff Shaw at the University of New Brunswick. It's called Aesthetics or Function in Lithic Technology. So basically talking about, why people might be heat treating rocks to turn them red.
And that's in the Journal of Anthropological Archaeology in 2000. Is that right?
2020. Yeah.
2020. Okay. Sorry. Yeah, of course. Sorry.
So it's technically the 3rd chapter, but it was the first piece that I published on my research, basically. And then the third, the third essay or paper, which is the 4th chapter, is called Persistent Placemaking in the... Hold on. That's the title of the thesis. I should know this. Hold on. I can pull this up here quickly. Give you the actual title.
Yeah.
It's called Pieces of a Persistent Place, Circulation of Washtenaw Chert, and Portable Placemaking on the Maritime Peninsula, Eastern Canada. So
it's
an argument about placemaking and how stone from a quarry can be thought of as groups basically circulating a notion of place. And so the quarries are these significant places in the landscape. They are persistent places, and pieces of them, so the lithics that you extract from those quarries and exchange or trade with kith and kin, basically, can be construed as an act of portable placemaking. And so your experiences at those at the quarry, your memories, the identity that you tie to those places, you probably are communicating that to people when you're handing them these beautiful rocks and making particular things on them. So that's the chapter 4, and then the final chapter is just a conclusion that kind of brings everything together. So,
all right. So not that you're going to need it, Ken, but good luck tomorrow.
Thank you.
Have lots of fun. And
I will.
For the listener, what we're going to do is, even though we're recording this on Ken's way out, we're going to turn this and probably some other content. We'll record an intro at some point after the dissertation, and then travel through time, and you will get this special piece from the Chili's airport, along with some more. Probably by the next time you hear from our Ken, our co-host Ken, he will be Dr. Holyoke, I suspect.
So that's a question that a lot of people have been asking me that I don't know the answer to. Am I Dr. Holyoke after I defend, or when I get my degree?
So I had to sort this out because you may recall that I also got a job without having finished, and it was contingent on a rather substantial pay raise to find out if I was done. And so I called UConn, and the registrar assured me that even though I had not yet been handed the old sheepskin, that I was Dr. Hrynick, and more importantly, they assured human resources that I should get my visiting assistant professor rather than my lecturer stipend or whatever it was.
Well, there you go.
Instructor, maybe, I can't remember what it was. And so I think for all you certainly morally will be Dr. Holyoke by 24 hours from now, 48 hours from now.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good to know.
Yeah.
But I better get going. And
all right.
Thank you, listener.
Thank you very much, listener. And don't let them shoot the plane down, Ken. Well, Ken, how was the thesis defense?
It was successful. So it was yeah. There was excellent committee. Marie-Pierre Boucher chaired it. She's from the Faculty of Information. External appraiser Stephen Loring, my core committee Michael Shazen, Craig Sapola, and Gary Copeland, who's my supervisor, and then Max Friesen and Tad Banning were rounding out the group there. And yeah, and it went quite well. Very well received. Lots of interesting questions. Couple curveballs from Tad.
Such as.
So I have editorial. I don't know what anyway, there's editorial changes, I think is what the name of it is. But basically it's like minor tweaks that need to, there's a citation he had mentioned about heat treating that I should add in, a few other things that he's flagged, that kind of thing.
But edits that aren't substantive, really, but are necessary. No. Yeah.
But one thing that he picked up on is that one of the published papers, the statistics may not have actually been done right. And he's unsure how it actually got through peer review, because he is actually an editor of that journal, and said that this should have been flagged like right away. In the chi-square that I did, he thinks that the numbers might have been reversed or something like that. So anyway, I'm sorting through that with him to go.
Oh, he thinks you screwed up your own chi-squared.
Yeah. Oh, and he's unsure if we ran the wrong numbers. So he also said that you're supposed to show the tables in the publication. He's not sure why it didn't show up in the publication.
Interesting. Is this a certain journal beginning in J and ending in 2 A's?
Yeah.
I think having just had a paper, which we'll talk about maybe in the hit pieces, my recent JA paper is just littered with typos.
There are a couple of them. Yeah.
I think that I think it's possible that the copy editing that might ensure that things like tables get in has suffered over at Elsevier recently.
So in any case, his comment was that this is somewhat pedantic and inconsequential to your interpretations, but why don't you take a look at this and we'll get the proper table put in there.
That's great. Yeah,
kind of bizarre, actually.
Yeah.
So I actually feel ethically, listener, I will be obliged to actually submit an addendum to that paper, or an erratum, basically, and correcting the stats, which I think is an incredibly important thing to do.
It is, and in fact, Ken's going to do this in such a way to actually boost his tenure case. He's gonna. The paper that's going in is Holyoke responds to Holyoke et al. I would say, and Holyoke and Banning responds to Holyoke et al. That's
something like that. But I mean, and really interesting conversations about landscape and place, and why place instead of landscape, or how do they fit together, and some excellent commentary from both Max and Stephen Loring on community engaged archaeology, as two archaeologists who have done really truly community engaged archaeology for decades now. Stephen Loring probably among the first to do like a really genuinely community based archaeology project in the far northeast, really, I think, probably and in many ways, or
very far northeast,
very in the farthest north of the northeast, so pretty neat stuff. It was really fun. Dr. Loring was kind enough to gift me a piece of Ramature, which was pretty neat.
That's fantastic. So he came out in person for it.
No, he mailed. He was on Zoom, unfortunately, but he mailed a chunk of chert to Gary to give to me for the defense. So
that's incredibly nice. He's an awfully nice fellow, isn't he?
Yeah, incredibly kind, and that was the thing. It was actually ended up being a really fun conversation. The questions are hard. You have to answer them, but lots of time to kind of talk about them and respond to them, and then had just a really kind of enjoyable conversation at the pub afterwards to kind of elaborate on some of the comments and it, it's I'm always very uncomfortable with people kind of like lauding, saying, giving me praise or whatever, but it is kind of neat to hear however like the different things of your thesis that everyone really enjoys, and having basically people tell you that this is a real contribution and that it's done,
it's excellent. Yeah,
which is pretty cool. Like so yeah.
As Bill Farley likes to say, D is for done.
Yeah. So and I'm not sure how much for enlightening thought I'll have about it today, but the glow is sort of still there in a little bit, and I it's it is odd to be able to have the new honorific. So I'm not the real Dr. Holyoke, though. My sister is an MD who will remain the real Dr. Holyoke. So
nor am I. The friend of mine was at a family thing or something, and he his I think cousin must have just finished medical school, cousin or something, and the cousin's parents were proud, and my friend's mom said, "Oh yeah, my friend is going to be a doctor too, but not the kind that helps people." Still think is a good line. Did you manage to change your airplane ticket to reflect the new title?
No, I wasn't able to do that on this occasion, but I guess shame. when I go back, and probably in November, I guess for convocation, maybe I can have the honorific then. So
there you go. I hope so.
I was pleased because you and I, as the listener has just heard, you and I had a discussion toward the end of our conversation a couple of days ago about whether or not I actually am Dr. Holyoke before I'm conferred the degree. And Ted emerged from their, so when you finish the defense, your whole committee sits and chats about what their, score is for it. Basically, there's at U of T, there's different rankings. So there's complete, passed with no revisions, passed with editorial changes, passed with minor revisions, and passed with major revisions. And then there's fail, which I think you shouldn't be at the defense if fail is one of those options. But
something's gone awry.
Something's gone terribly awry. But yeah, and so each of them has like kind of, so basically I send corrections to Gary, to my supervisor, and then we forward it to SGS sometime in the next couple of weeks. So but when he emerged from the room, he came out and said, "Congratulations, Dr. Holyoke," which is kind of cool to hear. So
yeah, that's great. Yeah. Well done. That's all very exciting. And so I was going to ask you, do you have any advice for a student who is starting out on their PhD?
Don't do it during a pandemic. So try to anticipate that. Don't be afraid to start a family. In many ways, having family will help you pull through. Actually, it's important to have necessary distractions, and whether that is a partner or children or a pet or even just a really good hobby. Make sure your life isn't your PhD, because that would be incredibly difficult. Take time to ensure that you and your supervisor are going to work, and make sure that you do that before you get started. Meet with them, have a conversation, try to be, on a social level, are you going to be able to get along with them? And if you start and you feel like there are issues, don't be afraid to talk to somebody about maybe either switching to a different supervisor or finding somebody that might be able to co-supervise to help you navigate that. Because ultimately, your success is probably going to be contingent upon having a supervisor that is attentive, constructive, but also that you guys have a relationship where you can trust each other, where you can take commentary and critique from your supervisor in a way that is going to make your work better, as opposed to create sort of an acrimonious relationship between the two of you. Inevitably there will be tension between the two of you, like nobody likes to have their work kind of critiqued and or heavily edited, or I just don't think this works, like that kind of thing. But I was incredibly lucky to have Gary as a supervisor. He's very patient, and took the time to really think and be very thoughtful about my work and predict the kinds of things that roadblocks that might come my way, and help me navigate through things like challenges with permitting, like that kind of thing. Like, well, maybe try this instead. Advice on talking with community members, like, so make sure you're a good fit for your faculty member. And at the end of the day, also just like don't think of your PhD as the best thing that you're ever going to do. It's the best thing you've done to date, and work incredibly hard at it, and ensure that what you're doing is contributing something new, and be able to pick out what you think the contribution is, and be able to communicate that. Like, what do you think is the contribution of your literature to your field, or research to your field? But don't feel like it's going to be the best and only thing you ever do, because I think once you get done, what you'll realize is that there's so many more avenues. Even if academia isn't your field, your professional career, whether it's in archaeology or something else, is going to be it'll be enhanced by you having that degree and finishing it. I think that's the key, is just push through and finish. It can be really tough, but yeah, it is fun at the end. Now that I'm there.
Yeah, what is that's the distinction between, is it type 1 fun is fun while it's happening, type 2 fun is it's fun that I did it?
Yeah.
That was my understanding.
One is from one you get from eating too much sugar or something.
Exactly. I think that's all great advice, Ken. And actually, I think maybe one thing that we forgot about to talk about when we were discussing the pregame is that just one thing that a PhD is very good for is learning to take criticism. I think about the written work. It's just one of the key things I think that really in a good PhD program you'll get a lot of.
Having humility and knowing what you're, like I had a question that was asked to me during the defense yesterday, and I could answer part of it, and I said, I like, that's just not my strength, and I'm not gonna try to fumble through an answer, and like that's not.
You said, wait, Ted, that letter's called a chi?
yeah. So I mean, I said, like, statistics are really like about as far from one of my strengths as you could get, and I was like, I genuinely do not have an answer of why I did not use that statistical test for you. And I was like, and I wrote the paper almost 4 years ago, and I will admit I don't remember what went in what columns. So I'll get back to you on that one. But he was pretty funny about it, though.
That's good.
Yeah. He said he feels like it's he explained to me in the bar afterwards that it's the last chance we get to make you feel really uncomfortable. And then we get to have a beer with you afterwards. So
no, that seems good. And so where'd you go for the beer?
To the Anthropology Haunt Prenup Pub. So
is that the one right beside the Elmacombo?
No, that's the Red Room. Oh yeah, we went to the Red Room, didn't we?
Went to the Red Room, yeah.
Yeah, so another Anthropology Haunt. It's on College Street. So it's ostensibly, I guess, a Belgian bar. So they specialize in like European craft beer. Like, they have a different glass for every different kind of beer, and
cool.
Pretty good food there. Like
cool.
They're known for their prenup, marriage, and divorcee mussels. I also noticed they've added a cocktail to their menu that's called the Sleepy Joe.
Oh, have they?
Yeah.
What's in that? Does it say?
I feel like it was a whiskey cocktail. I was gonna get one, and then they have Fuller's London Pride there on tap, and there's not very many places that have that, so that's usually what I get when I'm there.
Right. And I think because people also come to this this program for our restaurants and drink spots reviews. If the listener finds themselves in Toronto, I mean, I think we're happy to recommend Bar Raval.
Yep.
But there were some good kind of hole in the wall spots there in, I think, Kensington that are quite good.
Yeah. There's a really great spot. There's Rasta Pasta, which
Pasta,
which is a Jamaican Italian fusion restaurant. New Boogle, very good.
What's New Boogle?
Very good wood fired bagels.
Oh, lovely.
My favorite restaurant, sort of in the campus area, is Harvard House, which is just west of campus on Harvard Street.
Cool.
And they have confit duck wings, which I'm not sure if you could make a wing better than a confit duck wing. It is transcendent in terms of the experience.
Quite good.
Yeah. And if you like wings, this will just change your life. So
wow. Cool.
And then my favorite Caribbean spot, which was very close to campus, was Tasties. But just
you took me there once. Yeah, that was quite good.
For $8.50, you get basically a quarter.
$8.50 Canadian. That means they actually pay you if you pay in American money. It's sort of strange.
Yeah. So you get like a quarter jerk chicken and then some rice and peas and veggies. Yeah.
That's great. The and the name of that dumpling spot that
Mother's Dumplings.
Mother's Dumplings. Yeah,
that's an excellent spot too.
Also highly recommended.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think, Ken, that we should obviously congratulations. I mean, this is very exciting. The listener, I don't know if the listener knows this, Ken and I were master's students together.
Yep.
And then Ken worked in industry for a while, and then went back to do the PhD. And it's excellent to have the doctor is in, so this is good.
Yeah.
This is good. Congratulations.
It's
much earned.
It's very exciting. So
yeah, good.
Yeah.
And what are you going to do to celebrate when you're back in the other part of Alberta?
So I don't know. I think my wife and I will probably try to get out for dinner together this weekend. But I probably hang out with the kids this weekend and then finish up some course prep stuff. We've got classes start here at the University of Lethbridge on Thursday.
Here too, I'm afraid.
Then we're into the semester. So pretty busy fall. My brother-in-law gets married after the next weekend, I guess, which will be pretty fun.
Cool.
But yeah, no, it's a busy fall. I don't think I'm going to be doing any conferencing this fall. Unfortunately, I'm going to miss all my friends at the Eastern States Archaeological Federation meeting.
We'll be hurtling that way in a 14-passenger van on a multi-day road trip.
Yeah, it was going to cost me somewhere in the order of about 10,000 Canadian dollars, I think, to get to Ocean City, Maryland. So,
and I'm real curious what kind of knife and gun club we're staying at, because the nightly fee is $69 at this hotel in Ocean City. So that should be fun.
Tuck your pants into your socks.
I think, Ken, perhaps, Dr. Holyoke, at this point, we should pivot over to hit pieces. What do you think?
I think that's a great idea.
All right, Ken. Well, we've got some pretty exciting hit pieces this week. And the first one I wanted to highlight is some work by Bonnie Newsom, Donald Soctomah, Emily Blackwood, and a fellow who actually I don't know, but I think his name Jason Brough, Brough. Three of them are out of the University of Maine, and then Donald Soctomah is the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer for the Passamaquoddy in Maine. And their paper is called Indigenous Archaeologies, Shell Heaps, and Climate Change, a case study from Passamaquoddy Homeland. And it is in the forthcoming Advances in Archaeological Practice. And this is a really good paper, and it discusses the UMaine Field School in Machias, Maine. It's a field school, incidentally, that I am an alum of. I did a field school, the Machias, Maine Field School. And this article talks about some of the collaborative approaches that University of Maine and the Passamaquoddy Tribe and Maine Coast Heritage Trust are using to build collaborative archaeology. So it deals a lot with actually the integration of archaeology and language learning. And of course, those coastal sites are rapidly eroding. And so highly recommend this article.
I hadn't seen that one. That's I'm excited to read that, actually.
Yeah, this might be kind of down your alley, actually, Ken.
Yeah. I wonder if we should get Bonnie on the show to talk about that. Would she want to come on?
She very well might. She's on sabbatical. And I think we should see if she'd like to. It would be interesting.
Yeah. And then
and sorry, just one more thing. They've actually got a great research program in general out of the University of Maine through the Climate Change Institute too, which is doing a lot of this kind of work. So lots of interesting stuff.
Very cool. Very cool. And then our other hit pieces for today are actually a couple of things that involve co-host Gabe Hrynick. So the first of them is in our previous episode, we discussed some of the work that paper that Gabe and Arthur Anderson and a couple of colleagues at University of New Brunswick, your subject librarians, is that correct?
That's right. So Eric is our subject librarian, and then Mike Meade is kind of the all things digital imaging guy here.
Yeah, and so that paper in Advances in Archaeological Practice, which is Embedding Librarians in Archaeological Field Schools, is out now, so you can find it wherever you like to find your Advances in Archaeological Practice literature. And then
it's embedding librarians, not embedding archaeologists, as Ken and I misreported in one of our grant applications.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to flag that is open access, that one. So
that's fantastic. Okay, great.
Yeah, there's one of the many perks of writing with librarians is the librarians realized that the University of New Brunswick had some kind of a agreement with Cambridge that got us free open. I'm sure it's not free. I'm sure someone paid for it, but free to us open access publishing with AAP, which was exciting.
That's fantastic. And so for those of you who are listening, in the show notes, there'll be a direct link to that article, and you can just click that and read it as you would sort of a news article, or you can download the PDF or something like that. And the other one, this is a paper that I've been looking forward to seeing for some time, because I know Gabe and Matt Betts have just published in the Journal of Anthropological Archaeology, a paper entitled Late Maritime Woodland Period Hunter-Fisher-Gatherer Complexity in the Far Northeast Toward an Historical and Contingent Approach. And so this builds on an argument that Gabe and Matt sort of kind of set the stage with in their book from a couple of years ago, Archaeology of the Atlantic Northeast. Great read. And basically, Gabe, do you want to kind of give the rundown of where you guys came at this from and some of the data that you're pulling into this? And the paper is sort of making an argument, presenting a case study, and in sort of a compelling way, and drawing on, pulling a number of different lines of data together. So do you want to kind of speak to that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. Just to kind of, I guess, put it sort of briefly. And I should say this article drew on a lot of work by other people, including our own Dr. Holyoke. And the premise was basically that in recent years, hunter-gatherer complexity has been a hot topic. So as the listener knows, folks on the Maritime Peninsula were hunter-gatherers until after European contact. And when anthropologists talk about complexity, what that just means is it's referring to a kind of political system that involves political organization beyond the family band that characterizes most hunter-gatherers. The classic example of hunter-gatherer complexity is the Northwest Coast, where people make big houses. They have, like I said, political organization beyond the family band. They have population grows. And it's long been thought that was supported primarily by a particularly kind of lucrative Northwest Coast fishery and otherwise marine adaptation.
Yeah, there's sort of these criteria for what you would call complexity that I think we've covered on the show before. But did you want to kind of rehash just a couple of those, what those things might be?
Yeah, sure. So it's things like big houses. It's things like intensification to get more food resources. You might see evidence for expanding interaction spheres. Storage. That's an important one. We also look a bit at the ethnohistoric record to just sort of, what kinds of aggregations and interactions are people describing at first contact? And we basically just try to sort of make the point in this paper that the idea of ancestral Wabanaki people being kind of, I think the famous Dave, or it's not, maybe not a famous Dave Sanger line, but the old Dave Sanger line was that Algonquian hunter-gatherers basically behave as hunter-gatherers should, was the quote, I think. And we basically argue that, well, no, they don't really. There's, in fact, lots of evidence for complexity. And the overarching argument that we make, actually, is that maybe thinking about complexity as a kind of package, as things that always happen together, is less effective than thinking about complexity as a kind of loosely related collection of practices that can be deployed under different circumstances and can be reeled back in. You can stop doing certain kinds of activities like building big houses, intensifying resources, and so forth. Draws heavily on arguments put forward in dissertation by Kevin Leonard out of the University of Toronto. And then, of course, all of the usual suspects on their various specialties.
Yeah, so it's an excellent paper.
Well, thank you.
That one, I enjoyed reading it. I don't think I saw a draft of this one, but I think we've had enough conversations that I was pretty sure what the content was going to be, but it was great to finally see it come out. And actually I was able to cite it in my defense presentation yesterday.
Oh, that's lovely.
So, yeah.
Well, thanks very much.
So,
I really appreciate that.
Yeah. So you guys got an entire slide to yourselves where I'm talking about in the context of what we're seeing with exchange with Soctomah Church in late Maritime Woodland. It's being kind of an example of this widespread movement of exotic lithic materials, basically. So
that's lovely to hear. And maybe a little cyclical because I think we cited you for that in the paper, but they
that's all right. That's excellent. So we've got a couple more hit pieces that we're going to save for next episode. I think we're going to start getting back to a little bit more regular recording schedule here. And before we wrap, though, I think we are back on the line with Trevor Dow.
We certainly are, and the listener can't see this, but Trevor Dow.
Hello.
Show that's the man himself. Is a sharp dresser under any circumstances, but he's wearing a suit with a gigantically wide tie, and I think those are bell-bottom slacks, which he's holding up to the camera. And so he looks a bit like a game show host, and it's possible the reason he looks a bit like a game show host is that Trevor Dow is the official swag representative for the East Coast of the Ecofor bingo game. How are you, Trevor?
I'm well. How are you guys doing?
Doing very well. And
that's lovely.
What do you so Trevor he teaches a little bit at UNB, and he's also a cultural resource management archaeologist, most recently for Ecofor. And so what kind of things do you do for Ecofor, Trevor?
I do a variety of things there now, mostly sort of senior archaeological kind of things, reviewing other people's work and reports and things like that, reviewing subcontractors' work and what have you. But I've been doing a bit more field work out on this side of the continent for Ecofor this last couple of years. But yeah, I mean, we're mostly based on the West Coast. We have, offices in Prince George and Fort St. James and Fort St. John and Kitimat and Kinsale and all through BC there. And then we have some offices in Alberta and excuse me, an office in Whitehorse as well. And then I have another colleague who works out of Dartmouth. So I'm not completely alone on the East Coast, but I am one of the only people here in New Brunswick. So
yeah, well, Ecofor has really populated all of the most desirable cities in Canada, I would say.
They've got a heavy presence on the Yellowhead Highway where I used to that was my old haunts at one point. So
yeah.
Exactly. But in all seriousness, the Ecofor is one of the you guys are doing all sorts of interesting work and lots of interesting folks work for you. And it's exciting that you're getting back into the East Coast game despite working for a West Coast company.
Yeah, it's nice to be back doing East Coast field work again.
That's great. And we're going to have Trevor on, obviously, to talk about his own graduate research, which involves policy in a bunch of interesting ways and mapping the discipline. But today, as the suit would imply, we have Trevor on because Ecofor generously donated a bunch of swag for us to raffle off to folks who have submitted finished bingo cards. So, listener, this is not going to be your last.
Should we have a drum roll effect in here when we when this is in post?
Should we have a what?
A drum roll effect?
Oh yeah, go ahead and add the drum roll. Since it won't pick up the gong. So the listener may recall that Ecofor generously donated a whole bunch of swag. Nice backpacks, nice trowels, nice hats. Those are custom trowels with the Ecofor symbol. And the way this works, listener, is if you send in a finished bingo card, I guess we should say a bingo card that's finished according to the rules of winning bingo. You know, it's a line, or I guess you can get blackout. We will enter you into the next draw. We now have enough of these for our first draw, but so keep them coming. And Trevor, in this draw, what is the winner going to get?
Yes. The winner is going to get one of the snazzy Ecofor branded Marshalltown trowels.
Oh, wow.
Very, very nice trowels. I have one myself. And I think we're also going to give away one of these really snazzy waterproof backpacks. I think that's what we talked about, right? In this one.
Yeah,
I think that's the plan.
These are really nice.
Snap a picture of those for Instagram or something, eh?
I will. Yeah, they're StormTech brand backpacks, so they're all rubberized. They'll keep your stuff nice and dry. I have two of them. I use one in the field, and I have one for commuting, like my daily commute back and forth to university and stuff. But they're like the zippers on them and stuff are all rubberized. So you don't have to worry about weather and rain and stuff kind of getting into them. But they're like I guess we call it a day size backpack. So it's good for, lunch and an extra change of clothes and stuff like that for the field, or like I said, just your daily commute.
That's absolutely right. And in fact, when Trevor mentioned that Ecofor was interested in sponsoring this, we didn't realize that Ecofor didn't understand how sponsorship usually works. That usually that involves some of this swag would have been, waterproof backpacks would have been moved to the hosts, but instead Ecofor is a very egalitarian kind of operation. And so what Trevor is doing right now is he has picked up I think it is a spinning basket, and he's spinning the handle, and I am seeing a bunch.
It looks like a safety helmet to me, because safety is an incredibly important part of the CRM game, Gabe. That's PPE right there.
Yeah, well, he's in the safety helmet, I see. But okay. So he's shaking the safety helmet, and it's an Ecofor branded safety helmet. And Trevor, would you reach into there? And the listener should know that we've actually we've written each of these on special Ecofor they're sort of ping pong balls to give it a certain game show feel. And would you shake that up, Trevor, and reach in there, and would you pull out a name, please?
All right, Gillian.
All right, congratulations, Gillian. So Gillian, who I am fairly certain is a regular listener, because I believe that Gillian has commented on the Instagram before. Congratulations, you will be getting the Ecofor backpack and trowel. And Trevor, am I right that if we get Gillian's address, you can mail it to her?
Yes, that's right. If Gillian wants to reach out to you guys either through the email address or the Instagram and provide those details, then we'll get that sent out to her.
You can do that.
Exciting.
Well, thank you, Trevor. Thank you, Ecofor, and congratulations, Gillian.
Congratulations,
Gillian. And thank you guys for. Sorry, Ken, I didn't mean to speak over you. I was just going to say thank you for the opportunity to do this. I mean, we have a lot of fans of the podcast in Ecofor, both myself, but also on the West Coast. So we're glad to do this. So
yes, that's lovely. We'll look for the backpack.
Exactly.
And thank you to Ecofor again, and tell the crew that if they're looking for the second generation of stickers, I can just pick an office and I'll send a few to distribute to the West Coast folks.
We'll send them to any fort you want. Fort McMurtry, Fort St. George.
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks, Thank Trevor. You very much, Trevor.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Well, Ken, I am looking at a half-finished bottle of sparkling. That's right, sparkling Courvoisier in celebration of your big win.
That's delightful. And I'm looking at a mostly finished Caesar. So that is my Courvoisier for today.
There we go. Congratulations again on your successfully defended dissertation, on your newfound degree, on the new honorific and the new postnomials.
Well, I appreciate it, and thank you, listeners, for tolerating me lamenting being in the throes of finishing this. And we're gonna have to come up with a new gag, I guess, for the second season.
I guess so. And we'll talk to you in about a fortnight, listener.
Yes, talk to you then, listener. Thanks again.
Take care. Bye.
All right, 3, 2, 1, clap.
Oh, that wasn't even close. Hold on. Sorry.
Right, 3, 2, 1, clap. There. Well, I think that was a good one.
Right.
Yeah. How's my level sound?
You sound good to me. Are you in the Chili's?
I'm in the Chili's. Can you hear the pop music in the background?
No.
Oh.